Hi, and welcome to CVC Interviews. My name is Joyce Vaudrey from Vernon. Today's guests are a couple of guys representing an organization here in Vernon. I say here in Vernon because that's where I live. Vernon, Rockville, called the New England Civil War Museum. Bet you didn't know we had one of those, did you? Well, that's why they're here tonight. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Dan, who's going to tell us a little bit about his role, and then Matt. Dan, welcome.
Thanks for having us. This is great to be able to talk about the museum here. And yes, that's the one thing that we hear all the time is, we have a Civil War museum here? Yes, we do.
And what is your role at the Civil War Museum?
So I'm we all wear a lot of hats, but yes. The main role I play is president of the board of directors.
Okay, so the overview of the whole thing.
Right.
Okay, gotcha. Matt?
Yes, I am the program director for the museum, so I take care of putting events together, and I also take care of our social media output.
Very good, very good. I like the new pictures I saw on the website from the last time I was there. So do you also help with the website and everything?
Not so much the website, but I handle our Instagram page and our Facebook page.
Excellent, very good, thanks. So glad you guys can make it. My husband Michael and I are big fans, so we wanted to help spread the word about what's going on here in our own little town. And one of the things that we really want people to understand, know, is that you guys are open every Saturday and Sunday.
Every Saturday and Sunday.
Every Saturday and Sunday.
10 to 3. Yep.
So, Dan, for someone who's never been there before, could you describe what you have available to us and where in the New England Civil War Museum?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. So the museum is actually within the Vernon Town Hall. So, and that was intentional. So when the building was built between 1889 and 1890, it was built as a hybrid town hall, but also as the living Civil War memorial for the town. So that's why Vernon doesn't have the statue of the soldier on the town green that a lot of other Connecticut or New England towns do. They wanted to make sure that this was perpetuated and was a living memorial. So on the second floor, part of that floor was set aside for use by the veterans themselves, the Civil War veterans. And if you've never noticed the beautiful stained glass windows, you will as soon as you go into the museum and you see those southern-facing windows. They're very nice. But the room that they had there, they had their meetings in there for between 1890 to the mid-1930s. Fortunately, concurrently with them was also the kids of all those veterans with their organization. So that was the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War, which we represent. And then, but also there was the Daughters of the Union and the auxiliary to the Sons and the Women's Relief Corps. There were a lot of organizations that supported Civil War veterans that met there. And then over the course of time, the veterans, as they passed on, they left a lot of their things there. And so of their things that they left, our predecessors in the early 90s said, hey, why don't we put a museum together of all of these priceless things that we have there? So in about 1990, 1992, the museum was actually incorporated, and they were able to find a few display cases to be able to put those things together, and that was the beginning of the museum. Over the course of time, of course, we've refined that, and what we have today is we want you to have the experience of the average citizen soldier during the Civil War.
Well, that's kind of what started our conversation before we began, because we had been there before, my husband and I, and so I saw the map that you have and you described the path. I find it interesting that you were a museum with a building before you had a museum, and then just looked around and said, our everyday stuff is a museum. I mean, I saw a typewriter sitting on a desk there. What year is that typewriter?
That is from the 1880s, 1890s. And what you saw there, hopefully, represents what that scene would have looked like when the veterans were actually meeting in there in the 1890s and holding their meetings and taking meeting minutes on the typewriter and doing their notes and correspondence. We were fortunate to have a photograph taken in the 100th anniversary of the town of Vernon of what that room looked like, and we're able to put back that front panel as close as we possibly could to the even to the point of where the calendars and the little photographs were that they had hanging up at that point.
It's a beautiful space. I love it, and it changed a lot. It's grown a lot since the first time I had been there. So you started to talk about the way the museum's set up. It originally was just a giant room, a big hall, where you would hold a big meeting, but you've utilized so much of the hallway space and the other nooks and crannies of the building that we referred to the tour map. So someone walking in to see this museum, you described it as like a timeline?
It's a timeline, yeah. So we want you to go through the experience of what an average citizen soldier would have had around that time. So yeah, the map that you're describing there has a few zones, and as you go into each zone, you start to learn more and more about what they would have been thinking and feeling. And you know, we of course have the bullets and the cannonballs and the muskets that you would expect a Civil War museum to have, but what we really want you to see and experience are the thoughts and the emotions of these people, because that's really what gets lost in a lot of Civil War interpretation. You see the long lines of blue and gray and all that, and professional soldiers. These guys weren't professionals, and they were proud of that. They knew they were going back to being civilians after the war. They were proud that they were temporarily in uniform, and so in that sense, that helps connect you to like us and regular people, because they considered themselves regular people. Sure. They had fears, the same the way we do. They were anxiety. People loved them. They loved their families. They had all of those same very strong emotions that we do today, and we want you to see that as their experience unfolds from being a civilian to learning to become a soldier and to going into service and going into the field and living outdoors. These guys lived outdoors for months at a time.
We were talking about that. One of the displays was actually the encampment, what a tent with the supplies were. I remember looking at it saying that guy probably had a lot of money because he had a lot of belongings, but even that was very sparse. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about what was it really like. That kind of leads into Matt. Matt does these programs, right? You were talking about September, you do the reenactment?
Yeah, so in September, end of September, early October, depending on when it falls, we do Living History Day. And what we do is we bring in reenactors, local reenactors, to enhance that experience and bring in visitors to the museum. We like to set up on the town green, so driving by you can see all the soldiers dressed up doing drill. We actually have the United States Naval Landing Party come. It's a group of reenactors that portray the Navy during the Civil War. We also have an artillery group come. They bring their big 12-pound Napoleon cannon, and there's a lot of different experiences that can be told just by those reenactors coming in, and then you go into the museum and go through that experience of what some of these guys who we're representing as reenactors would have gone through.
Are you a reenactor also?
Yeah, we both are.
You both are?
As a matter of fact, you want to see what a Civil War soldier actually looked like? Come on Saturday mornings when Matt's around, because he portrays the quintessential Civil War soldier.
Excellent. So when you do your volunteer work at the museum itself, you wear your uniform?
Yeah, every now and again I'll wear my union uniform to interpret and kind of be a walking, how do I say this properly?
3 or 4 dimensional.
Yeah,
a 3D,
an
interactive person, if you will, so that you can see that this isn't just a black and white image on a piece of paper. It's, it was something that was living and breathing, that somebody who, again, they're not that different from us would have experienced, and being able to also let people touch pieces of uniforms, reproductions, to bring out that experience. I think the one thing I hear the most is, wow, that entire uniform is made of wool. That can't be comfortable. You had to wear that in the heat of the summer all year.
You'd be surprised.
And that was something that they had to do. So when people get to have physical contact and be able to see somebody living and breathing in something like this, it really enhances that experience and that storytelling aspect.
I'm definitely one of those people that go to museums and I want to touch and hold and feel and and speaking of items, I'm going to bring it up because someone else here did your red button and your pin also, but could you tell us what, looks like a bingo chip to me, but could you tell me what your red button signifies?
Yes, so this is an example of a Civil War Corps badge. It's actually some of the early forms of like army patches that we would think of nowadays. In 1863, the general in charge of the Army of the Potomac, the Union Army of the Potomac, Joe Hooker, he implemented the Corps badge system to easily identify the different bodies of troops. So the shape is the Army Corps. So the circle is for the 1st Army Corps, and then the color would be for the divisions. So the red is the 1st Division, white is the 2nd Division, and blue is the 3rd Division. So if you're a general on the field and you're looking for a specific division of troops to be put into the field, you look into your field glasses, and if you see a red circle, you know that's the 1st Army Corps and 1st Division. And I actually had an ancestor who was with the 1st Army Corps at the Battle of Gettysburg.
Wow.
Yep.
Near and dear to my heart, too, is the Gettysburg visit.
Certainly.
So, Dan, you're wearing a very nice ribboned.
Yeah, so this is, so as president of the board of directors, I also serve in a parallel capacity. So as I mentioned, the sons of Union veterans of the Civil War have met here at the museum since the beginning. And the museum is actually a subsidiary of the Sons of Union Veterans camp that we have there, named after Dr. Alden Skinner, who was a local, very popular doctor who died during the war. And so my role with the parallel organization is commander, and so that is the pin that represents commander of the Alden Skinner Camp, Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War.
Thank you. So you brought some pins here to show us,
Yep.
and maybe talk about some of the other exhibits that are there that people can look forward to. Now these were in a case, so are these brought out for people to see?
Yep, absolutely. So this in particular right here, so this is what the veterans would have worn as the Grand Army of the Republic. That was their veterans organization name, the GAR. It was the badge that represented the ideals that they tried to live by after the war, the patriotism components, as well as remembering that this was a far-reaching conflict that involved everybody. And so this was one of the first conflicts that the average citizen person was celebrated as the main component of why the war had meaning, why everybody sacrificed so much. That's just why you see those Civil War soldiers on the statues on the town greens everywhere, is because they wanted to represent that the average person temporarily took up arms to protect their country in some fashion.
Wow, very interesting.
So that's what a lot of them would have worn. So anybody who was who met at the museum as a member of the GAR would have worn at least one of these. I also have examples there of what the officers would have worn, and then actually an old version of the pin that I'm wearing here, which would be for the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War. So that's what all the badges that they would have worn while they had their meetings and while they had official events.
Nice. Yeah. You've got some really odd exhibits. One of them is a log.
Yeah. So there's a section of a tree.
It's like this big.
Section of a tree.
It's on display.
Yeah. It's from the battlefield at Chickamauga in Georgia.
Chickamauga. That's what it was. Okay.
And so we keep it up because it's got a couple of levels of history in it. So when you go there and when you see this example, which happens to be about the size of a person, there are 4 pieces of artillery shell embedded in it. And so after the war, the southern farmers, being sometimes destitute, found a way to make a little money where they would take sections of trees that had bullets or artillery shell pieces in it, and they would sell them as souvenirs. After a certain amount of time, they figured out that that was a great way to make money, and so they would add things to trees every once in a while. So, you know, we can't prove one way or the other that it was authentically shot to pieces or if it was a souvenir, but in both ways it shows you that, A, there's an example of there were these trees that were actually cut down by that many bad things flying through the air at you that could kill you. But at the same time, it's a memory of how the war was perpetuated. After.
The after years are as interesting, if not more so, than some of the pre-war years. And authenticated was the word I was looking for. So it was authenticated that it was a tree and fragments from the time of the Civil War. So that was the authentication. And then you have a model that actually it goes into the water.
Yeah, that's the model of the USS Monitor.
And it's about 10 feet by 4 feet. I mean, it's huge.
It's pretty darn big. It sits on we have it on a 6-foot folding table. So that was faithfully designed and built by Jim Delaney, one of our members, and his wife Wendy is our friend's manager and utility player that covers a lot of different hats at our museum as well. But he designed and built that himself.
It's amazing. That
was the United States' first ironclad warship, and it had a few Connecticut connections, but it was pretty much what all modern warships are now based off of. But he designed it such that he can radio control it and sail it out onto a stream. The turret turns, and yes, it could actually even fire its miniature custom cannons.
So, so for those of us who we can't get enough of learning more about history, you have quite a library of books available, and some are part of your organization, so they're not like library, you can check them out, but if you need information. But you also offer some free books. You have a lending library there that has a lot of history books that are available for anybody to just go in and browse through it. So I really want people to understand not just that you guys are there, but all the cool things you have and all the interactive events. So I know we talked about the Live in History Day. Do you have anything coming up in the next couple of months that we might be able to keep our eyes open for?
Yes. Well, if you're into miniatures or into kind of tabletop war games, stuff like that, it seems like that's starting to become more and more popular. So a few of us paint miniatures and stuff like that in our limited free time. And we've started bringing that to the museum in the way that we recreate some of the historical battles. Previously, we've done the Otto cornfield, the 40-acre cornfield at the Battle of Antietam. We've done the wheat field at Gettysburg. And then on January 21st, which is a Sunday, we are doing the Battle of Bryce's Crossroads, and it was a mainly cavalry engagement. So. If you're interested in doing that, please give us a call or give us an email at necivilwarmuseum@gmail.com, and we have that coming up in January.
Excellent. So it's great for people to know to send. That's a great email for you guys. The other thing that it's an ongoing and making it very personal, can you tell me about Seth Plum and why do we want his pants?
That's a great question, yeah. So we have a very unique opportunity to bring the uniform home from, it was at a museum in Texas for a long, long time on display, and the museum is closing. So we have the opportunity now to obtain that uniform and bring it back to Connecticut. It was owned by Sergeant Seth Plum, who was from the 8th Connecticut Regiment of Volunteer Infantry. And he made it all the way through the war to the 8th Connecticut's very last battle, where he was unfortunately mortally wounded. But that uniform that he had, including, and it's actually his coat and its hat, that the cap that goes along with it, along with his monogrammed handkerchief. And there's the coat of his brother, actually, who it's the Grand Army of the Republic veterans coat that he wore after the war when they had meetings in the post that was named after Seth, his brother.
Oh,
So we
Very
do have the
personal.
opportunity to bring those home at a pretty steep price tag because of how important these items actually are. They're beautiful examples of 160-something-year-old textiles.
textile, yeah.
So we're raising money to be able to complete the bill for that, to be able to bring that to the museum and put them on display for everybody to be able to see.
And that's a GoFundMe?
It's a GoFundMe, yeah.
So you can go to GoFundMe, or you can go to your website, which is where I saw it.
Right.
And any amount would definitely be helpful.
Oh, absolutely,
Certainly.
yeah.
I sense a little urgency at this point. Are we getting closer to a deadline that?
We're about a month away from the deadline, yeah.
Okay.
So really anything does help. The brokerage is very helpful to be able to work with us, but they do need to be able to move things through. So yes, anything would be able to help. What's kind of neat is that all the money that we've raised for it has been grassroots from
Wow.
the everyday people,
Yes,
right? So which
yes.
is kind of fitting for the type of museum and message that we're trying to portray.
But if someone was really good at writing grants or getting funds, you'd happy to have them on board, huh?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a kind of another point, is that we're 100% volunteer. There is no professional member of our staff, so it's whatever time and it's whatever funding we can get our hands on to be able to do the programs, to be able to obtain artifacts, to be able to create new exhibits and interpretation for people. So if you donate to the museum, 100% of it goes to interpreting history.
One of the ways I like to help you out is I buy things in your gift shop. There is no fee to visit the museum.
Right.
Certainly, yep.
I would ask folks to keep in mind that there is a donation box. So I hope folks who do visit put something in the donation box. But also, well, we brought the coffee mug here and the T-shirt. I bought a book that was written by a local author and signed. So I'm really hopeful that we can get more folks to understand what you guys have. We've been there a couple of times. Actually, I realized this was our third time there on Sunday, that it's constantly changing. You're adding new things all the time. I would have remembered seeing the monitor there before, so that was really cool seeing that in the middle of the floor. That was really a great exhibit to look at and up close to see it. So I love that it's a lot of interactive things, and I want folks to understand the more that they know about the history, the more they can learn about their own history, but also where we're from here in Connecticut.
Absolutely.
I just noticed that your flyer there has the pictures of the stained glass, and it has the GAR. So the GAR was the first organization that inhabited the building there?
Right.
Yep.
Okay, it was built for the Grand Army of the Republic?
Right.
Now, did that fold because they had all passed away?
That's it.
Pretty much?
They left.
Yeah.
They met until there were too few of them to meet.
Exactly.
And then the sons
Yeah.
all kept up afterwards, and the daughters, and really all the descendants afterwards.
So when someone gets to the museum and they get upstairs, and you'll see the stained glass windows when they get into the room, it's gorgeous. This map, you talk about the war begins, that's talking about, like the farmlands and what people were doing before. They were working, the land and things, and then they're moving through. Now the camp life is the one that I like. They talked about, you have that display up, but can you describe some of these other areas that you have, like the combat experience? Is that where the log is?
That is.
Okay.
Yes.
The combat experience, and then what are some of the things you would see as you move throughout this exhibit area?
Sure. Yeah, so we intentionally wait until the tour is about half over before we get into combat, because even though that is the most exciting and showy part of a soldier's experience, it was actually a very small part of their experience. So, but the time that they did spend in combat was very emotionally taxing and traumatic. And so instead of going through battles and troop movements and things like that, which geeks like us are very interested in, we instead want you to get the anxiety and the emotion out of it. So we draw from quotes from those soldiers themselves on what they were thinking and what they were feeling. You have no idea how this was. may you never see the sights I have seen, those types of things, because we want you to leave with that effect that real people experienced these things, and they had to live with it after the war, which then brings you into the last two sections of the museum, which is the cost of war, and that's not financial costs, that is human and emotional cost. So families that had to live with either lost family members or permanently wounded family members, those that had to deal with what they called at the time soldier's heart, which we know today as post-traumatic stress, and having to live with that for the rest of their life, and the effects that the war had on people throughout the rest of the 19th century and the legacy that it has through today. And then finally, the veterans and the Grand Army of the Republic, the ones that did survive, how they spent their time as veterans. What are the things that they really cared about? Why did they meet as veterans after the war? Was it just to hang around, or were there the things that they were doing and trying to promote at this time? So we want you to get the full timeline of what an average soldier, citizen soldier, would have experienced from the very beginning to their time as a veteran.
I can totally appreciate that, and I do like to read those more personalized stories. I just remember Matt and I were talking about a new exhibit you guys had up. You wear 3D glasses, so that's really cool. You got this series panels, and you first look at it, and I didn't understand. Oh my goodness, that's so cool to really make it come out and make it personal.
Certainly.
It was a very cool exhibit.
Yeah, we just put that up, I think like about a year ago, last summer, summer before last summer. And you put a pair of 3D glasses on because to look at these photos, it is three-dimensional. Originally, the way that the photography worked wasn't necessarily just to have a 2D image of whatever was exposed. I mean, there was a three-dimensional aspect to it. So to put those glasses on, it also kind of puts you in that scene. So there's some various scenes there. There's one with a line of musket stacks, how the soldiers would, on the march, would have put their muskets aside for something else to do, or there's a naval photo in there, there's some other photos in there, and there's also little exhibit points in those photographs. So there's a little number, and you flip up a little door, and it'll explain what that scene is.
It's very interactive. The museum has so many things for people like me who like to touch and do things and look at all the weapons and everything. I'm so glad you guys are here. I can't sing your praises enough. I want everyone to log on to your website at the very least. Take a look at what you got going on there and drop in. What else are you going to do on a rainy Sunday afternoon? My husband and I went to the museum. You're open every Saturday and Sunday, year-round. Well, I know you log on to the website. You guys will check it out. And stop at the gift shop, get a nice coffee mug or a sticker, or there's some really neat things. Some of the toys that you see at all of the museum gift shops, the plastic cavalry and things. So thank you all for joining us at CVC Interviews. Dan, Matt from the New England Civil War Museum, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.